Van Heflin as Joe Starrett. Van Heflin was born on December 13, 1908, in Walters, Oklahoma. He was 45 years old when he played Joe Starrett in the film Shane, 1953. As a tough, kind-hearted rancher who fiercely defended his family from the forces of darkness, Heflin brought moral strength to the Western and a quiet complexity to his character. Off-screen, however, Heflin's life was filled with fractures and contradictions. He entered Hollywood as an outsider. At one point, he was suspected of having ties to left-wing political groups during the McCarthy witch hunt, which abruptly ended his burgeoning career. Projects were shelved, leading roles disappeared, and the film industry stagnated. The pressure took its toll, forcing the already reserved man into even greater retreat. Marriage brought him little solace. In 1942, he married actress Frances Neal, with whom he had 3 children. However, long hours on set, rumors of infidelity, and growing emotional distance deteriorated the relationship. They divorced in 1967, after more than 20 tumultuous years. Family members remember Heflin sitting alone for hours, staring at the empty garden. Loneliness haunted him like a shadow for the rest of his life. Although he lived a quiet life, he managed his finances diligently, investing wisely in real estate and collecting royalties from hit films like Johnny Eager, with 310 to Yuma, an airport. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $3 million, a reward for a lifetime of hard work and perseverance. On June 6, 1971, Heflin suffered a heart attack in his swimming pool. After nearly 7 weeks in a coma at Cedars-Sinai, he died peacefully on July 23, 1971, at the age of 62. Edith Evanson as Mrs. Shipstead. Edith Evanson was born on April 29, 1896, in Tacoma, Washington. At 57, she played Mrs. Shipstead, a Swedish farmer's wife, in Shane, 1953, portraying a strong and patient woman struggling to survive in the harsh West. Although only a supporting role, it enriched the film and revealed Edith's characteristic authenticity. Before beginning her acting career, Edith worked as a court reporter, which allowed her to develop keen observational skills that were invaluable on screen. She married Morris Otto Evanson in 1923, but the childless marriage eventually dissolved. Throughout the 1940s and 1950s, she played dozens of supporting roles, from maid to stern housekeeper, alongside legends like Spencer Tracy, Joan Crawford, and Orson Welles. However, Edith was known for being difficult on set. She once argued with the director because he refused to cut her lines. In reality, she was withdrawn and introverted. Her marriage to Morris survived, but lacked warmth, and cracks began to appear in the marriage, especially as her career became increasingly uncertain in later years. After her final appearance on the series Apple's Way in 1974, she disappeared from the entertainment industry and became a recluse in Riverside County. Although she was hired by director George Cukor to train Marilyn Monroe and rubbed shoulders with Hollywood's elite, Edith remained a recluse. She had no children. There was no will. She died on November 29, 1980, of heart failure, at the age of 84. According to her wishes, her ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean. His fortune, though modest at around $3 million, was entirely donated to charity. John Dierkes as Morgan Riker. John Dierkes was born on February 10, 1905. He was 48 when he starred in Shane, 1953, playing Morgan Riker, the cruel brother of cattle rancher Rufus Riker. At 6'1" tall and with a striking face, he was ideally suited for roles as cold, distant villains who sent chills down the spines of audiences, and for most of his career, he served as an ideal role model for Dierkes. Life in Hollywood wasn't easy for Dierkes. Although he began his career on the advice of John Huston and soon worked with legends like Orson Welles, Stanley Kubrick, and George Stevens, he never achieved stardom. Dierkes had a quiet and introverted nature, but as his interest waned, he became increasingly withdrawn. Darker roles began to take a toll on his mental state, making him more difficult and emotionally distant at home. His marriage to Cynthia Dierkes, who initially provided him with emotional support, soon fell apart due to his excessive involvement in acting and emotional detachment. He frequently missed important family moments, and his wife later accused him of a controlling and distant lifestyle. His relationship with his children deteriorated, and he spent the last years of his life in silence, away from the media, a loner haunted by the roles he played. Unlike many of his peers who turned to alcohol or drugs, Dierkes had a quieter and more dangerous addiction: smoking. Years of smoking led to severe emphysema, which sapped his strength and the unique voice that had brought him fame on screen. He died on January 8, 1975, in Los Angeles, just weeks before his 70th birthday. He died alone and sad. His estate included a former home in Santa Monica and a collection of rare personal items valued at about $2 million, a modest sum considering the emotional toll he carried in Hollywood. Edgar Buchanan as Fred Lewis. William Edgar Buchanan II was born on March 20, 1903, in Missouri. In the 1953 television series Shane, he was 50 years old when he played Fred Lewis, a simple and reliable farmer who dares to stand up to land grabbers. Although the role was brief, it did Buchanan justice and reflected his true personality: kind, strong, and always a champion of justice. Born into a middle-class family whose father was a dentist, Edgar was forced to follow this path, even though his heart was set on theater. While studying dentistry in Oregon, he secretly studied acting. After graduating in 1928 and marrying Mildred Millie Spence, he put his dreams on hold. It wasn't until 1939, after he was married, had children, and had a stable dental practice, that he took the risk and resumed his amateur theater career in Pasadena. It was a bold and stressful step. Millie became the family's sole breadwinner, working as a dentist while Edgar waited for acting roles. They sold their car, downsized their house, and endured hardships so Edgar could pursue his dreams. Over the past 4 decades, he has become a familiar face on television as Uncle Joe Carson on the series Petticoat Junction, Green Acres, and the Beverly Hillbillies. But success brought new pain. He rarely returned home. Although Millie continued to support him, they gradually grew apart. His adopted son, Buck, said his father appeared more on screen than off. Edgar openly admitted he was tired of playing comedic and eccentric roles. He longed for deeper, more serious roles. The conflict between passion and duty forced him to live 2 separate lives, one as a beloved television star, the other as a lonely husband behind the scenes. On April 4, 1979, Edgar Buchanan died at age 76 in Palm Desert, California, after a massive stroke and complications from pneumonia. He was buried in Forest Lawn Cemetery in the Hollywood Hills. By the end of his life, his net worth was estimated at $10 million, not from his starring roles, but from more than 100 memorable performances over 4 decades. Alan Ladd as Shane Allen Walbridge Ladd was born on September 3, 1913 in Hot Springs, Arkansas. When he played Shane in 1953, he was 40 years old and fully prepared to transform into a cold-blooded yet honest gunslinger in the Western masterpiece, Shane. This role not only defined the silent hero model in American cinema, but also etched Ladd's name in the memories of millions. But behind this aura lay a life of suffering. Ladd lived a life of poverty from a young age. He lost his father at the age of 4, wandered through refugee camps with his mother, grew up poor, and felt guilty about his short stature. He fought his way to fame, from obscure radio announcer to film noir icon and cowboy hero. But fame came at a price. Ladd suffered from chronic insomnia, severe depression, and relied heavily on alcohol and sleeping pills to cope with the sleepless nights and pressures of fame. In 1962, Hollywood was shocked when Ladd was found unconscious in a pool of blood, with a bullet lodged near his heart. Police accepted his version of events, claiming it was an accident during the investigation of an alleged intruder. However, inside sources speculated that it was a desperate cry for help from a lost man. His love life was no better. His first marriage ended in divorce. His second wife, who was also his agent, was the last person to stand by his side as he descended into alcoholism and drug addiction. Ladd often avoided eye contact, even on set. He looked at me, but his eyes were shifty, as if he were trying to hide from life itself, recalled one actor. On January 29, 1964, Alan Ladd was found dead in bed in his Palm Springs home. The cause of death, brain swelling caused by a combination of alcohol, barbiturates, and sedatives. The dose wasn't enough to kill him, but it was enough to stop his heart. He died at age 50, leaving behind a 5,000-acre ranch in Hidden Valley and an estimated net worth of $25 million. Emil Meyer as Rufus Riker. Emil Meyer was born in New Orleans in 1910. With his striking features, menacing gaze, and husky, commanding voice, he was quickly cast in powerful villainous roles. But behind his role as Baron Rufus Riker in Shane, 1953, a man willing to hire assassins to protect his territory, at 43, he was a man full of conflicts and struggling to manage his personal life. Success came late. It wasn't until he was 40 that Emil truly made his Hollywood debut, thanks to the keen eye of Elia Kazan. However, as his career rapidly developed, his personal life fell apart. His erratic and explosive temperament led to conflicts with directors and collaborators, most notably on the set of Skin in the Bloom, where Stanley Kubrick ordered him to reshoot dozens of scenes. Kubrick's perfectionism and Meyer's temperament soured their relationship, to the point that they never worked together again. In reality, Meyer had numerous extramarital affairs that ultimately led to the disintegration of his family. His wife, a high school teacher, abandoned him after nearly 2 decades of his behavior, taking their only daughter with her. Meyer lived alone in an old house in Louisiana, collecting antique guns to regain the control that life had stolen from him. Toward the end of his life, Alzheimer's disease rapidly destroyed his memory. Once a man with the ability to memorize scripts, he ended up forgetting the titles of his films and even the names of some family members who visited him. Sadly, Emil Meyer passed away on March 19, 1987, at the age of 76, due to complications from Alzheimer's disease. His fortune consists primarily of an old house in Slidell and a collection of antique weapons valued at about $5 million, a modest sum compared to the earnings of his peers. Jack Palance as Jack Wilson. Jack Palance was born on February 18, 1919, in Latimer Mines, Pennsylvania. He was just 34 when he played Jack Wilson, a ruthless and sinister killer. In 1953's Shane, it was only his 4th film role, but it brought him fame and a 2nd Oscar nomination, cementing Palance as one of Hollywood's most iconic villains. Behind his steely exterior lay a life of suffering and perseverance. From the son of a coal miner to the boxer known as Jack Brazzo, Palance boxed for a few $100s to survive until an accident during bombing practice in Wadua left him disfigured. His scars and piercing gaze became his trademark in the movies, but the spotlight couldn't calm his inner turmoil. Palance was known for his explosive temper, impulsiveness, and coldness. He frequently walked off set, clashed with other actors, and caused chaos among the crew. He had 2 unhappy marriages, including a nearly 20-year relationship with his first wife, Virginia Baker, which ended in divorce and a bitter property dispute. Alcohol became an indispensable companion during his lonely years. Friends often described him as a man battling his own ghosts. He spent his final years quietly on a farm in Pennsylvania and in a luxurious home in Montecito, California. When he wasn't acting, he painted, wrote poetry, and raised cattle. Several of his paintings were sold with handwritten poems, and his art collection was auctioned off just months before his death. His net worth was estimated at $10 million. On November 10, 2006, Jack Palance passed away at the age of 87 at his daughter's home, after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. A solemn funeral mass was held at St. Michael the Archangel Ukrainian Catholic Church, a heartfelt tribute to a man who never forgot his heritage. Elisha Cook Jr. as Stonewall Tory. Elisha Vanslick Cook Jr. was born on December 26, 1903, in San Francisco. In Shane, 1953, he was 49 when he played Stonewall Tory, a courageous pioneer who was tragically shot. Small, shy, yet resilient, Cook offered audiences a powerful portrayal of a weak man facing evil. The character also reflected the nature of his own life. Elisha's success in The Maltese Falcon 1941 proved to be the curse of his career. After playing Wilmer Cook, the young, bug-eyed assassin, Elisha was relegated to roles as losers, henchmen, and pathetic criminals, often punched, strangled, or shot within minutes of appearing on screen. He once bitterly admitted that he had died on screen more times than any other actor in history. Behind these roles lay a soul devastated by the injustices of Hollywood, where he worked for 60 years without ever being considered a true star. Cook's personal life was also turbulent. He married singer Mary Lou Cook in 1928 but divorced after 13 years. His second marriage, to Peggy McKenna, was also troubled. They divorced in 1968, remarried in 1971, and remained together until Peggy's death in 1990. Childless and with few showbiz connections, Cook became a ghost in an industry that was draining him. He withdrew from Hollywood, spending most of his time in a cabin in the Sierra Nevada mountains, fishing, avoiding noise, acting occasionally, and then disappearing again. Despite this, he amassed a net worth of approximately $2 million with over 150 roles. On May 18, 1995, Elisha Cook Jr. died of a stroke in a nursing home at the age of 91. He is the last surviving cast member of The Maltese Falcon, a timeless icon of the golden age of film noir. Douglas Spencer as Axel Swede Shipstead. Douglas Spencer, born William Henry Messenkop, was born on February 10, 1910, in Princeton, Illinois. Standing 6'4", with a deep voice and a kind face, he was perfectly cast as the friendly farmer Axel Swede Shipstead in the 1953 film Shane when he was 43. Although he was never a star, Spencer left a lasting mark on cinema with his memorable and moving supporting roles. However, behind his calm exterior lies a life of quiet turmoil. Before becoming famous for his roles in The Thing and This Island Earth, Spencer spent years as a stunt double for actor Ray Milland. This relationship landed him some minor roles, but it also trapped him in someone else's shadow, a burden Spencer carried silently until his death. His personal life was not a bed of roses. At one point, he was embroiled in a blackmail scandal when his former lover threatened to reveal their secret relationship to the press. Although the incident was quickly forgotten, it left its mark on his career, even costing him roles in several high-profile projects. Spencer struggled with diabetes, a condition he hid for years, and by the late 1950s, the disease began to wreak havoc on his body. Repeated hospitalizations and mounting medical costs gradually depleted his already strained finances. "I play strong men on screen," he once told a friend, "but I've never felt weak in real life." He died on October 6, 1960, in Los Angeles, at age 50, from complications of diabetes. He left behind about $1 million, mostly from profits from recent television roles and some remaining properties. Brandon DeWilde as Joey Starrett. Brandon DeWilde was born in Brooklyn on April 9, 1942. At age 11, he played Joey Starrett in the 1953 film Shane, a legendary role characterized by his wide-eyed gaze and the poignant line, "Shane, come back!" With this role, Brandon became the youngest actor ever nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, and from that moment on, his path to stardom seemed set. However, in the spotlight, Brandon quickly sank into stress and disorientation. As he grew older, his youthful appearance made it difficult to break free from his child star image. His film career stagnated, replaced by mediocre television roles. Brandon once bitterly confessed that he would give up acting until he was old enough to play a middle-aged man. Torn between adulthood and the expectations of fame, he turned to alcohol and drugs to fill the emotional void. His love life was equally chaotic. He was married twice. His first marriage ended in divorce, leaving him with one son. His second marriage lasted only a few months. In April 1972, Brandon married Janice Garrow, just 3 months before the tragedy. In his later years, he dreamed of dedicating himself to music, recording with his friend Graham Parsons, but the project never came to fruition. First came death. On July 6, 1972, while driving to a concert in Denver, Brandon's trailer lost control, struck a guardrail, and overturned, trapped in the wreckage and suffering serious injuries, including a broken neck, spine, and leg. He died at the hospital at 7:20 p.m. He was 30 years old. He was initially buried in Hollywood, but was later moved to Pine Lawn Cemetery in New York to be closer to his family. Brandon left behind personal assets and vehicles worth approximately $2 million, but more importantly, an emotional legacy. Jean Arthur as Marion Starrett. Jean Arthur was born on October 17, 1900, in New York City. In 1953, at age 52, she played Marion Starrett in the classic film Shane. As a gentle yet strong wife, Marion represents hope, love, and perseverance amidst the harsh landscape of the Old West. This is also Jean's final film role. Behind her serene eyes and charming smile, a troubled soul lurks on screen. Jean Arthur was known for her extreme perfectionism, plagued by extreme anxiety and a deep fear of both the stage and the cameras. Throughout her career, she repeatedly turned down projects and major roles, and even disappeared from film sets without explanation. These psychological struggles made Jean one of the most elusive stars in Hollywood history. Her marriage to producer Julian Anker lasted only a day. She then married photographer Frank Ross Jr., but the relationship quickly became strained due to Jean's emotional instability and withdrawn personality. She had no children and, in her later years, led a reclusive life, cutting off most contact with Hollywood and the press. It was a price she was willing to pay for inner peace. Despite her relatively early retirement, Jean Arthur lived comfortably thanks to smart investments and royalties from hits like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, The More the Merrier, and Shane. At the time of her death, her net worth was estimated at $4 million, a significant sum for an actress who had been out of the spotlight for more than 3 decades. Jean Arthur died on June 19, 1991, in Carmel, California, at the age of 90. She was a beauty from the golden age of the screen who spent her life avoiding the spotlight that made her shine. Ben Johnson as Chris Calloway. Ben Johnson was born on June 13, 1918, in Faraker, Oklahoma. In 1953, at age 35, he starred in the film Shane as Chris Calloway, a brutal criminal who eventually respects justice and switches sides. Few people realize that this character is a reflection of Ben's real life. Johnson grew up surrounded by dirt, horses, and ropes on his father's rodeo ranch. A near-fatal accident during a competition led him to Hollywood, where he began as a jockey. However, a tragic moment when he saved 3 people from a speeding horse-drawn carriage on the set of the film Ford Apache caught the attention of director John Ford. Success, however, did not come easily. After daring to challenge the notoriously controlling Ford, Johnson was banned from films for over a decade, which hampered his budding career. During the politically volatile McCarthy era, Johnson was also criticized by movie studios for refusing to acknowledge his political views, which made it even harder for him to find work amid the Hollywood witch hunts. Ben Johnson's personal life was more stable than that of many of his peers. He married Carol Elaine Jones in 1941, and they were together for over 50 years until her death in 1994. Though they had no children, their love remained strong. Johnson, however, remained estranged from his family. Some relatives resented him for leaving home so early, and he carried this loneliness with him throughout his life, often relying on his horses. In addition to acting, Johnson ran 2 large horse ranches in Arizona and Oklahoma. He regularly refused raises, even after winning an Oscar in 1971 for his role as Sam the Lion in The Last Picture Show, often saying, "I'm just doing what I do best," which is riding horses and making cowboy pictures. This modesty allowed him to invest wisely in land, real estate, and cattle, amassing a fortune estimated at $100 million, an impressive sum for an actor who never sought fame. On April 8, 1996, while visiting his elderly mother in an Arizona nursing home, Ben Johnson suddenly collapsed and died of a heart attack at the age of 77. He was buried in a cemetery in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, where he promised to return when the applause subsided. His mother, Ollie, lived 4 more years, passing away at the age of 101. Now they both rest in peace and will never be separated again. Steve Raines as Riker's man. Steve Raines was born on June 17, 1916, in Grants Pass, Oregon. In 1953, at age 36, he starred in the cult classic Shane as Riker, a tough and unruly henchman working for the ruthless cattle baron Rufus Riker. Raines stood out for his tall stature, piercing gaze, and cowboy attitude, a product of his real-life experiences as a World War II soldier and rodeo champion. His life was a journey from orphanage to Hollywood. From the 1950s to the 1970s, he appeared in numerous Western series, including Rawhide, Maverick, and The High Chaparral. Behind the scenes, however, he lived a man torn apart by addiction, anger, and poor decisions. Raines was once fired for getting involved in a drunken brawl on the set. Steve was a breath of fresh air, but he couldn't control his anger, said a director. His personal life was equally chaotic. Raines had several short-lived marriages, often ending in tears, divorce, and accusations of domestic violence. Once, after a heated argument on the farm, he was forbidden contact with his youngest daughter. Despite owning valuable real estate in Oregon, he repeatedly fell into debt due to failed investments and had to sell land to cover legal expenses. He spent the last years of his life isolated, close to the land where he grew up. On January 4, 1996, Steve Raines died of a stroke at the age of 79. His net worth was estimated at $3 million, most of it in the value of his ranch, although much of it was mortgaged to pay off debts.